November 1, 1945. The beaches of Kyushu, Japan. The sky is black with smoke. The ocean is churning, not from the wind, but from the wake of 3,000 steel hulls. This is not a drill. This is not a simulation. This is X-Day. You are standing on the deck of a troop transport, one of 500,000 Americans about to storm the gates of hell. The air smells of salt, diesel, and the terrifying metallic tang of fear. Ahead of you lies an island transformed into a fortress, a nation that has sworn to die before it kneels. We are told that World War II ended with a flash of light. We are taught that the mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki were the finale, but that is the comfortable version of history. That is the version that lets you sleep at night. The reality is far darker. The reality is that the atomic bombs were not the end of the plan. They were merely the opening move of the greatest apocalypse mankind had ever engineered. The United States did not just plan to drop 2 bombs and wait for a white flag. We had prepared a sledgehammer of industrial violence so massive, so terrifying, and so absolute that it would have erased an entire civilization from the map. We called it Operation Downfall. It was the invasion that never happened. But the plans were drawn, the ships were loaded, the weapons were primed. And what history books fail to mention is the one decision that changed everything. The secret weapon wasn't just the atom, it was the willingness to burn the rules of warfare to ash. Before we go deeper, let me ask you something. If you're holding your phone right now or watching this on your screen, have you subscribed yet? If you haven't, do it now. Subscribe to World War II Dark Secrets. The scale of what the United States built in 1945 is almost impossible for the modern mind to comprehend. We were not just a country at war, we were a planetary force of logistics and steel. By the summer of 1945, the American war machine was operating at a level of surplus that defied logic. While the rest of the world was scavenging for scraps, the United States was building floating cities. Operation Downfall was split into 2 phases. The first was Operation Olympic, targeting the southern island of Kyushu. The second was Operation Coronet, striking the Tokyo plain. To understand the sheer weight of this attack, look at D-Day in Europe. The invasion of Normandy was massive. It is legendary. But Operation Downfall was designed to dwarf it. The U.S. Navy had assembled a fleet that covered the ocean from horizon to horizon, over 40 aircraft carriers, not 4, 40. Battleships, cruisers, and destroyers numbered in the hundreds. We were bringing 5 million men to the doorstep of the Emperor. This was the rich warrior strategy in its ultimate form. We did not fight fair. We fought with the crushing weight of infinite resources. The American philosophy was simple: burn metal, not blood. If a sniper was hiding in a building, you didn't send a squad to clear it. You leveled the city block with artillery. If a hill was fortified, you didn't charge it with bayonets. You turned the hill into a crater with naval gunfire. The U.S. military had become a factory of death, efficient, detached, and overwhelmingly powerful. We had the ships to bridge the Pacific, we had the planes to black out the sun, and we had the industry to replace every single loss within weeks. But the enemy knew we were coming. Japan was not sitting idle. They had correctly predicted exactly where we would land: the beaches of Miyazaki, Ariake, and Kushikino. They knew the tides, they knew the terrain, and they had spent months turning the island of Kyushu into a honeycombed trap of death. This was not a battle for territory. This was a battle of ideologies. The Americans fought to live. The Japanese prepared to die. The intelligence reports landing on President Truman's desk were grim. They didn't speak of victory. They spoke of carnage. The initial estimates were terrifying, but as the summer of 1945 wore on, they became nightmares. The intercepted radio traffic revealed that Japan was moving every spare soldier to the landing zones. They were stripping the defenses of China and Manchuria to fortify the beaches. They weren't building defenses to survive. They were building defenses to take as many Americans with them as possible. The unknown story here is the psychological state of the American command. General Marshall, General MacArthur, and Admiral Nimitz were staring at a meat grinder. They looked at the maps of Kyushu and saw Iwo Jima, but multiplied by 1,000. Iwo Jima had cost 26,000 American casualties for a tiny rock. Okinawa had cost 75,000. Kyushu was massive. It was home to millions. The math was cold and brutal. If the ratio of casualties held, the invasion of Japan would not just be a war, it would be a slaughter of American youth on a scale that would break the nation. So, the United States decided to escalate. We decided that if the Japanese wanted a war of annihilation, we would oblige them. The rich warrior was about to take the gloves off. We weren't just bringing tanks and rifles, we were bringing a terrifying new arsenal that had been kept in the shadows. We were preparing to unleash hell in a way that would have made the trenches of World War I look like a playground skirmish. The second phase of this nightmare was the weaponization of the very air they breathed. History remembers the atomic bomb. It forgets the gas. It forgets the chemical stockpiles that were quietly moved to the Mariana Islands, Guam, and Saipan. The United States had signed treaties. We had promised not to use chemical weapons. But facing the prospect of 1 million American dead, those promises evaporated. The plan was cold, calculated, and industrial. The U.S. Army Chemical Warfare Service had prepared massive quantities of phosgene and mustard gas. The strategy was simple. The Japanese dug into caves and tunnels. They were immune to conventional bombing. You could drop 1,000 pounds of explosives on a mountain, and the soldiers inside would just dust themselves off. Fire couldn't reach them deep underground, but gas could. Gas is heavy, it sinks, it flows like water into the cracks, the vents, and the tunnel entrances. We had the bombers. The B-29 Superfortress, the most expensive and advanced technological marvel of the war, was retasked for chemical payloads. The plan called for a blanket of poison to be laid over the landing zones before the first Marine boot touched the sand. We were going to suffocate the defense before the battle began. This reveals the terrifying pragmatism of the American war machine. We had the moral high ground, yet we were prepared to use the most reviled weapons in human history to protect our dominance. The logic was utilitarian. The gas would kill the defenders in their holes, sparing the lives of the teenage boys from Ohio and Texas waiting on the transport ships. It was a trade, their agony for our survival. But the horror didn't stop at chemicals. The most shocking secret of Operation Downfall was the tactical use of nuclear weapons. We tend to think of the atomic bomb as a strategic weapon, a city killer. But in the summer of 1945, the production lines at Los Alamos were ramping up. We weren't just making 2 bombs, we were making a conveyor belt of them. General Marshall seriously considered using atomic bombs not just on cities, but as tactical battlefield support. Imagine this scene. It is November 1945. The invasion has begun. The Japanese resistance is stiffer than expected. A massive concentration of enemy troops is holding a valley, pinning down the U.S. 6th Army. Instead of sending in the Marines to die, the call goes out. A B-29 flies over the battlefield. A flash of light brighter than the sun obliterates the Japanese division. And then, just 48 hours later, American troops are ordered to march through the crater. We didn't fully understand radiation yet. We knew it was dangerous, but the commanders believed that if they waited a day or two, the ground would be safe to cross. Operation Downfall would have seen American GIs marching through nuclear wastelands, driving Sherman tanks over glass-fused sand, unknowingly cooking themselves with invisible rays. It would have been the first and likely last nuclear war fought on the ground. The industrial might of the United States made this possible. We had the uranium, we had the factories. By late 1945, we would have had 7 to 10 bombs ready. 1 for each major landing beach, 1 for the reserves, 1 for the crossroads. The rich warrior does not hoard his gold, he spends it to buy victory. The U.S. was ready to spend its nuclear arsenal like artillery shells. This willingness to use total destruction speaks to the fear the Japanese defense inspired. The U.S. military was the most powerful force on Earth, yet it was terrified of what awaited it on Kyushu. The intelligence report showed that the Japanese were hoarding aircraft, not for dogfights, but for one-way missions. We expected thousands of kamikazes, not just planes, but suicide boats, suicide mini-subs, and human torpedoes. To counter this, the U.S. Navy had developed the Big Blue Blanket, a system of constant air patrols and radar pickets so dense that nothing could get through. We had proximity fuses for our anti-aircraft shells, tiny radars inside the bullets that detonated when they got close to a plane. It was space-age technology used to swat flies. But even with all this tech, even with all this money and power, the planners knew that some would get through. They knew ships would sink. They knew thousands of sailors would burn. The preparation for Operation Downfall was a testament to the American capacity for organized violence. We